All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today with Arlen Grossman. It's a Tuesday with Arlen. Arlen, how are you?
I'm doing just fine, thanks. I'm not too happy about my basketball team. The Warriors didn't do so well, but they can't be expected to without Stephen Curry.
Well, I think that's exactly right. Curry's incredibly valuable. He's their best player. I think when he went down, the chances that I guess they're called Golden State still, even though they moved, they're in San Francisco. Have you been to the new arena there in San Francisco?
I have not. Who can afford those kind of seats? I can't.
I don't know. What are you looking at? Like $100 for the worst seats, basically?
I really haven't looked, but it's fun to get them on television. I like that. So, and also the Boston Celtics are falling apart too.
Well, I can't say I'm in the least bit disappointed. I am a longtime Knicks fan growing up in New York City, or first born in New York City, Arlen, and then moving to the suburbs of Manhattan. You can understand why I would be rooting for the Knicks.
And I was a Laker fan growing up, and Boston kept beating them every year. So, yeah, I'm not too happy with Boston either.
Arlen, bringing up the NBA, I wasn't going to go in this direction at all, but I don't know if you followed this latest conspiracy theory story, but the NBA draft order was chosen last night. In other words, which teams would get lottery picks and where in the lottery. And to the surprise of many, the Dallas Mavericks won the lottery. They'll have the first overall pick, even though they were they were pretty far down the list in terms of the likelihood that their ping pong ball, which I understand they don't even use the ping pong balls anymore. My son William says it's completely opaque. No one has any idea. They go in a back room and then they come back out and they tell you this is the team with the first pick, and nobody believes it's on the up and up. The conspiracy theory, Arlen, is that in order to give LeBron and the Lakers a shot at a championship this year, the league went to the Mavericks and said, trade Luka Doncic to Los Angeles, and we'll see to it that you get the first overall pick in the draft, Cooper Flagg, who is a tremendous talent. So what do you think about that conspiracy theory?
That sounds like a conspiracy theory based on I don't know what, so I have no idea.
Well, it was a very odd trade. No one could understand why the Mavericks would give up one of the top probably 3, 4, 5 best players in the league in the prime of his career, who took them to the championship last year. Clutch player, extremely popular. Why would you trade him for, admittedly, once great AD, Anthony Davis, but someone who was over the hill and probably wasn't going to lead the team to any future championships? There were a lot of questions about that trade, but if you accept that the Mavericks were promised that first overall pick, that, the Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, said, hey, I've got a Dallas Maverick ping pong ball palmed in my hand. I'm going to make sure that's the ball that gets selected for the first overall pick. Maybe it makes a little more sense.
He's not going to admit that, of course, and we'll have no idea of knowing what that's all about. I'm just glad the Warriors were able to get Jimmy Butler now. That's a great player to get, in the middle of the season. That's made a big difference if Curry was playing.
Big game Jimmy, great player, playoff Jimmy, whatever you want to call him. I'm a fan too. Love Jimmy Butler. Big East guy, came out of Marquette. So we're disappointed here too that the Warriors aren't moving on. It looks like, right? But look, OKC's a great team. They had the best overall season record, maybe the Cavaliers, who are also almost certainly going to lose. So the teams with the two best, the OKC is going to actually advance, but the Cavs will probably go down. Interesting.
We'll see what happens to the next two. Your team just might have a shot.
I think they really do. I think they'll beat the Celtics, especially with the Celtics' best player, Tatum, now injured. It would be quite a turnaround if somehow the Celtics come back and pull this out. All right, let me just set the table, Arlen. You are the thought leader. Everyone can see it right there on the screen, the green and white below Arlen. And I'm Hal from Halitics, and we hope you'll join us regularly. If you haven't yet, please click the subscribe button bottom right. Arlen and I kick around politics. We have different views. We pretty much have the same, values. We want the same things for our country, but maybe sometimes see different paths to get there. In that vein, Arlen, you recommended a piece. Well, we'll get to it in just a moment, but it is about Israel, Gaza. It is about really the Middle East more than specifically Israel and Palestine, where I focus. We'll get to it. But before I talk about the situation in Gaza, just to billboard the Thomas Friedman piece, did you feel like Friedman was a little bit less critical of Trump than you would like, A, or that you expected, B?
Well, I think I'm glad he's going the way he's going. He's giving Trump some credit, and Trump does deserve some credit if Trump is backing off a little bit from Netanyahu, which he appears to be. He's going overseas and not even visiting Israel. I've never heard of such a thing, happening with a Middle East presidential trip. So that's. I think I'm happy that Tom Friedman is thinking that way, as is Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, it seems like we may be moving in a slightly better direction than we have in decades. Really, I mean, it's been that long that our foreign policy there's been no daylight between us and Israel. So let's hope maybe Trump, to the surprise of everybody, Miriam Adelson, one of his top backers, he put a number of very staunch Zionists in positions of power. It would be a surprise if he pulls us far, a little bit away from the Netanyahu axis, but we'd certainly be delighted if he does. At least I would be, and clearly Arlen wouldn't mind at all. Let's just talk about why. I mean, look at what Israel's done. The death toll now, 52,908 killed, identified dead since October 7 in Gaza. It is... it's just unspeakable. It's unspeakable what they've done with, according to the piece that you brought to my attention, the Friedman piece, were 50,000 dead, and I think he says 18,000 children. I thought the number might even be higher, but I accept that. We'll get to it, Arlen, in just a sec. You don't need to go look. 46 killed in the past 24 hours, and I hate when I sort of cut off my little stuff on either end, but 46 killed in the past 24 hours. And we're not going to give Trump any slack at all when it comes to that number, because he has supported Israel and the Israeli genocide since March. 46 additional deaths. There's your number. We'll go super fast. And since Trump took office, according to Middle East Eye, 2,780 Gazans killed. And I estimate, given the number that we've seen, the percentage of women and children killed, that is likely well over 1,000. It's evil. It's just it's a horrible thing.
It's also unpredictable as to what Donald Trump is really thinking. He switches from one side to another side, to one viewpoint and another viewpoint. You never can quite nail him down. So, he would, if he's able to see that Netanyahu is not cooperating, then that's a good thing. Then, we could get something done. But if he sticks with Netanyahu all the way, then we'll never get anything done, because Netanyahu doesn't want a two-state solution, doesn't want, he's happy to the way things are, where he's in office, Netanyahu, and they can't get him, the justice system can't get him because he's under indictment for a few things like Trump was. So, yeah, it's we don't know for sure what Donald Trump is going to do, but it looks a little better than it did before.
I think that's very well said, Arlen. If you want more detail about what's happening this moment in Gaza, I do recommend this report in Democracy Now! Or on Democracy Now! Amy Goodman, they talk about it in detail. The blockade, the resulting famine there, the virtual complete absence of any food. This is Dateline today, May 13th. So this is a story that happened today, and we see catastrophic. And just real quick, according to Oxfam, wholly reputable source, people are starving to death, with hunger reaching catastrophic levels.
I got to tell you how I just can't see Trump being very upset by people starving and all that. He's just not the type that cares that much about, the conditions of other people. But if he sees that they're, if he sees that it's worthwhile, he'll go for it.
You're You're saying, I'm sorry, Arlen, if there's a political cost to him continuing to support Israel, or if he sees a political value in separating from Netanyahu, he's likely to do that. I think that's a very fair assessment. Trump has not ever struck anybody, I think, as a particularly empathic or caring person. That said, I don't know that we can look back at previous recent presidents from either party and come to a different conclusion about their humanity.
Yeah, I've said often enough that, Trump at least is not a war hawk. He's not the worst of those kind of, war hawks. So he does seem to care if peace is not going on and people are dying. And he wants to, I think for his own legacy, he wants to have some peace in the world so he can take credit for it. And it's tough to come by.
Yeah, I think you're right about the legacy part. What we've read a lot about, and I'm sure this comes from inside sources, that Trump, he likes the bling, he likes the awards, he likes the honors, he wants to be the center of attention. Apparently, he is very, very thirsty for a Nobel Peace Prize, and he views a route to that award through peace negotiations, both in the Ukraine to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict, as well as to end the genocide. So if that's his motivation, I'll take it. To me, what matters is ending the killing. If he wants to end it because purely for selfish, self-centered reasons, okay, we'll take it.
But can he get Netanyahu to go along? That's what we have to wonder about, because Netanyahu would be thrown out by his very conservative opposition if he tried to get too close to. It's just a mess, I think, and nobody can really be sure what Trump really is going to do. The bottom line. So, yeah.
Well, I think the issue of whether Netanyahu will go along is kind of the answer is obvious. If Trump says no more arms, we're cutting you off, we'll go along.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen.
But why do you say that? See, I find that such a frustrating response, because that's obviously the solution. So why do you think that? And you said this about Harris-Biden. I felt, maybe I'm wrong, Arlen, you were excusing their support for Israel by saying, well, it'll never happen. But I don't understand that. The president can make pretty much whatever they want happen.
Well, sure, but he has to have the rest of the country and his government follow along with him, and really, there's no pressure coming from anywhere else to stop all the arms and all the bombing and all that. Trump cannot make anything good come out of it politically for himself, I don't think.
I actually think that's incorrect. I think we've seen polling, it's certainly among the Democrats, that they favor Palestine now over Israel. The cause of Palestine is more popular among Democrats than the cause of Israel. And it's never struck me that, except for the evangelical wing of the Republican Party and maybe the billionaires, that they're particularly the working class, let's put it that way, the working class in the heartland, they don't want to see our billions, their tax money going to bomb Palestine. That's not something that they could care less about. So I think there's real political value for a president who stands up to Israel.
Well, you got to ask yourself, is Trump going to stand up to Israel? Because I just don't see it at this time. It would be great if he did, and I'm with you on what you've just said, but I just don't see it happening. I don't think there's enough, it's not popular enough in this country, I think, to stop. But
well, so are you saying that it's the influence of the pro-Israel billionaires is greater than the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans who oppose our support for genocide? Indeed, the relatively small number of very well-placed Democrats who just did not vote for Kamala Harris seems to have been because of her refusal to say, no, I'm not going to support Israel.
I just don't see a groundswell of opinion saying that we should back away from Israel. And, it's just, I just don't see it in the American public. They're not talking about it. It's not the biggest of the issues that we're talking about. Unfortunately, it should be,
Well, Thomas Friedman's talking about it now. The Pope is talking about it. It seems to me it's to the extent you're not hearing people discuss it, it's because the media has done everything possible to keep it out of the public eye. And even so, opinion polls say Americans want this war to end. They want the killing to end, and they want our support for it to end.
Well, we just don't know what's going to happen out of all of this. I don't think it's a major issue for most people. They're happy to support Israel if you don't examine real closely who is actually dying, which is women, children, and civilians. That's just a sad part of it.
All right. Well, the new UN report does say that 1 in 5 people in Gaza now are facing starvation, and every child, you mentioned, when people realize that children are paying the greatest price, that could also sway public opinion. So that is the case. Let's hope it does. We'll see.
Yeah, we could hope, but we just don't know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just to sort of put a bow on this and just make my opinion clear, I actually really do think this is an example of our not living in a democracy. I think most Americans don't want us supporting Israel at this point, and certainly most Democrats don't, but I think most Americans don't. And yet both parties overwhelmingly support it. So to me, this is a reflection of the government not responding to the will of the people in any meaningful way.
You're right about that. We're not a democracy. What the average person thinks is not as important as what the people with money think or the people in power think. So that's just an unfortunate part of our government.
Well, what you said is true, Arlen, of course. And speaking of people with power, would you agree that at least among columnists, among journalists, Thomas Friedman may be one of the most influential?
He's always been influential. I've always looked to him because he really takes in the entire picture. He makes, he just makes a lot of common sense. And if he's saying that, we should back away from Netanyahu, then I'm with him on that. But, it's going to be really hard.
Well, does his, remember what we were talking about, influencers, and obviously the billionaire class, the donor class. Thomas Friedman is very wealthy. I understand at one point he was estimated to be close to a billionaire, having married into a wealthy Midwest grocery store chain owner family. I think they lost a lot of money. The grocery chain didn't do so well for a while, but he's nevertheless influential. So what do you think is the likely implications of a piece such as this? The Israeli government, or this Israeli government, is not our ally.
Well, I don't think this is really a big surprise. I think Thomas Friedman has felt something like this all along. He's just spelling it out very clearly in this particular article that, we're getting hurt by the closest that we have toward Israel and Netanyahu, and we need to back off, or, things will just get worse.
All right, I see that I believe our friend Ari has tried to get on the program. Ari, I see that. I'm sorry I didn't hear the phone ring. It is set to ring, but it doesn't always do that. But I'll keep an eye out there. So if you call now, we'll try to get you on the line. I think he has a comment probably about Israel and Palestine. I just muted myself for an instant. We had a problem with this yesterday, but I won't make the same mistake again. What was struck, and Arlen, I always put you on the spot. When you recommend pieces, I always want to know first what struck you, why you thought this was something that was worth discussing.
The Friedman article?
Yes.
Yeah, because, he is influential. He is intelligent. He's smart. He talks to people and understands, the whole situation as well as anybody else. And he is Jewish, and, he's thought a lot about this. So he just makes a lot of common sense, in my opinion.
And you indicated that you thought it would be very tough for any U.S. president, right, to break with Israel. But it does seem that Trump is at least separating himself to a degree. That seems to be what Friedman is also indicating. I think your point that just to kind of underline what point you made, it's really too early to tell, right? To really draw money conclusions from this.
It is. I mean, how do we know really what Trump feels about Putin, Ukraine, Israel? You know, he goes back and forth, and you're never quite sure just where he's at any particular moment or who he's talked to last. People say that's who he tends to favor, whoever he talks to last. So we just don't know at this point. It's early.
By the way, we do have, I believe, Ari on the line. So I'm going to unmute you now. Ari, go ahead. You had a comment, I think, on this very topic.
Yeah, just a very brief, thank you, Hal and Arlen. Just a very brief comment. I'm thinking of it. I want to see what you guys think. The fact that the president, he's now in Saudi Arabia, I believe Saudi Arabia or one of those oil-rich countries. It might have been Qatar. But anyway, yeah, I think Saudi Arabia is correct. But anyway, in light of that, in that context, and he's, his way of doing things in the past, if there's any way to predict anything that he does, the president looks at business. Business is an important thing for him. And in the context of business thinking, maybe Israel's taking a back seat, which is very surprising. So I want to know what you think of that, plus the momentum that the country is showing, including people like Friedman, who I always thought was more like a very pro-Israel guy. The momentum seems to be very much leaning towards pro-Palestine or addressing the Palestine-Gaza issue. And that's all I had today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Ari. I'll let him go, and I guess he can take the answer off the air. Arlen, put some of the words from Friedman's article that I think respond to what Ari had to say, but do you want to answer first, which is basically the priority that Trump appears to put on business relationships, promoting profitable interchange between companies and and countries?
One thing that we haven't talked about at all, and it was in the news yesterday quite a lot, the airplane, this luxury airliner, worth millions and millions of dollars that Qatar wants to give to Trump. This is unprecedented. We've never had this kind of a gift from another country going to our president. And in fact, Trump has broken all the emolument clauses in the Constitution by, trying to make money off of his presidency. And it's very sad to see that he can get away with that.
Agreed, 100% on that. It's tremendous corruption. It's just unparalleled. It really takes it to, we've seen so much corruption in Washington and the White House, Capitol Hill. I remember Tom DeLay, I think back in the late 90s, early 2000s, passing bills around, $100 bills around to Republican legislators in order to vote a specific way. So the corruption has always been there, and sometimes it's worse than other times. This seems to really take it to another level where government gives Trump an airplane, a luxury airliner.
I think Trump's family takes advantage of all the possible business opportunities over there also. So, for Trump, he doesn't seem like he cares whether or not people notice that he's making a lot of money off of this presidency.
I think he's proud of it. I think he's saying, hey, look at me. I'm able to, convert the people's office into a steady source of many, many millions of dollars for myself and family. I'm able to enrich myself at the public trough rather than feeling a sense of shame, or maybe at least a little bit of, feeling that this is something you should keep under wraps. He trumpets it.
Well,
I feel pardon the pun.
It's one of those things that people say, well, if a Democrat did it, they would be, totally jumped on and ostracized and all that. But being Trump, he seems to get away with a lot more than ordinary people.
Well, to be fair, Arlen, when I point out to you the conflicts of interest in the Biden cabinet, how the foreign policy team was all tied to weapons manufacturers, you don't seem to be all fired up about that, whereas I find that just absolutely horrific. One of the scariest things I can think of.
Look at Trump's cabinet. They're all billionaires. They're all...
Well, but they're the foreign policy team, whatever you think of them, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, we're talking about Hegseth, we're talking about Tulsi Gabbard, and Rubio. Rubio, I think, is the worst by far. And Rubio was voted unanimously. I mean, the Democrats all supported Rubio, but neither Hegseth nor Gabbard, as far as I know, and I could be missing something, have ties to weapons manufacturers. The reason it's so bad for a foreign policy cabinet member to have ties to weapons makers is because they have a lot of influence over whether we go to war, how we respond to crises, threats. And if they have profit, if they have skin in the game, then they're far more likely to embroil us in wars or not to take the necessary steps to prevent war. And I think we definitely saw that in the Biden administration.
Well, it's one of those things that if you know history, you know what General Eisenhower said in his farewell speech about the military-industrial complex. And Eisenhower was right. They have much more influence than they should. And it's, it's real. Their military-industrial complex is out there trying to make money. And they seem to benefit by any kind of wars or any fighting.
Well, here you see some of the apparent factors that are causing Trump to possibly separate himself from Netanyahu, which are business related, just as Ari suggested. So what Israel's war on the people of Gaza means that there isn't better relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia. There isn't a normalized relationship between Israel and other relatively moderate, which I wouldn't call Saudi Arabia, but other Arab states like maybe Morocco, Algeria. I'm not sure what the situation is there. Egypt. If there were Jordan, you'd see a lot more tourism. You'd see more business. Maybe Trump would open a resort, on the Red Sea where he could make money. Now he can't do that. You'd have more investment, more innovation, less war, which Trump doesn't seem to favor. So those are some of the business considerations that Friedman identifies as having been harmed by, the activities of Netanyahu and the Israeli military. So that is consistent with what Ari's point is, which is, well, even if it's just about business, this war isn't necessarily what Trump wants when it comes to business.
Yeah, and you got to think though that if you have a lot right now, we have a lot of moderate Arab states, and the possibility is there for some kind of a peace agreement. But unfortunately, Netanyahu and his government are not interested in a two-state solution, which is really the only way to make this work. And until they become a little more flexible on that, we're just going to stay where we are. But the opportunities are there. I mean, there's a lot of countries that would like to have a normal business relationship, a normal political relationship with our country. And, it's kind of hard to get to that final push.
Friedman writing here, Arlen, Netanyahu is preparing to re-invade Gaza. So again, doing exactly the opposite of what Trump wants, with a plan to herd the Palestinian population there into a tiny corner. And it's interesting because, remember, Trump floated the insane idea that the Palestinians would all be evacuated from Gaza. I mean, and I would say that was a bad idea. I didn't like that idea. I thought it was a bad idea. I thought the right idea is you tell Israel, we don't give you any more arms. You don't get to kill Palestinians. They get to be safe, and you have to incorporate them. You like a two-state solution. I think only a one-state solution. We've seen two-state solutions fail in places like India, Pakistan, now close to a nuclear war. That was a two-state solution. In South Africa, for all the problems there, they did respond to apartheid, ultimately ending it with a one-state solution. It was one South Africa. I think that is the better way to go. But either way, peace rather than this endless war treating Gazans and Palestinians as disposable, as just in the way of Israel. Obviously, that has to end. Trump thought, well, hey, because he's under a lot of pressure from Adelson, from others, the Zionists in his cabinet. You have to placate Israel. You have to give Israel what it wants. Maybe we can evacuate the Palestinians. As bad as that was, to me, it's better than being wiped off the planet. But either way, that didn't fly, and now Israel may be going it a little bit alone in its war against the Gazan people. So
I think I read something about Israel is going after one of the Hamas leaders over there, so they're trying to assassinate him, just like they've done with so many other leaders in that region of the world. You know, they have a lot of effective military power, that's for sure.
it's hard to see this ending well, Arlen. I think your point is good, which is Trump's influence over Israel is limited if he's not prepared to cut Israel off. Because and Friedman makes that same point. He says Israel's just saying, hey, we're going to do it. We don't care what you say, Trump. Even still, unless there's fear, I think that the U.S. will abandon Israel completely, they're going to continue their homicidal ways.
Yeah, and they're not. Things are not going to change. So I think Netanyahu probably feels rightly that he can do pretty much wherever he wants militarily, and no one seems to be able to. There's nobody to stop him. So it's a shame, and it really costs a lot of people a lot of lives, and it just doesn't have to be this way, but it is.
Well, again, I get back to if it doesn't have to be this way, how would you? I know you favor a two-state solution, so going with that for a moment, if you were advising Trump or you were advising Biden before Trump, what would you urge them to do in order to move to a two-state solution if possible?
Well, it's a good question, Hal. I think that there's a lot of, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of states over there who are now more moderate, more willing to negotiate on different matters, more willing to give Israel some slack if they would stop, doing all their military things. So, I think that's what Trump really needs to do: get all those countries that are over there that are reasonable, get them together, and see if they could come to some kind of agreement that would work.
But you don't see that including either a threat to cut Israel off or to remain neutral if Israel were involved in some kind of a regional conflict with Saudi Arabia and other. I mean, it's almost as though Trump is saying we're going to be neutral because Trump is negotiating with the Houthis. Trump did agree to a ceasefire. We're not bombing the Houthis anymore. That's the group in Yemen, which has been targeting Red Sea ships and specifically ships with Israeli flags. Trump said at first to the Houthis, well, if you target Israeli ships, we'll view that as an attack on the United States. And he responded with with a brutal, murderous campaign against the Houthis, which I condemn, without any reservations. But now he's entered into a ceasefire with the Houthis, and the Houthis are still targeting Israeli ships. And Trump said, okay, go ahead, target them. Just leave our ships alone. You go after Israel. We're not going to say a word about it. So that's leaving Israel to its own devices. Likewise, the last thing apparently the Israeli Knesset wants, and certainly that the army wants, or Bibi, is negotiations bilateral between the United States and Iran. And we're engaging in bilateral negotiations now with Iran without Israel's presence, without seeking their approval of whatever deals we might reach. And one other point that this comes from Friedman, Arlen, is that previously when talking to Saudi Arabia, we've said, well, we need you, if you want us to have, we need you to normalize relationship with Israel for us to, be fully invested in Saudi Arabia. Now, Trump's saying, nope, you don't want to ally with, you don't want to normalize relations with Israel. You want to reserve the right to support Israel's enemies. Yeah, hey, whatever works for you.
Well, yeah, things are probably going to stay the same for a while. The potential, like I say, is there for, countries are becoming more reasonable about things like this. But getting Netanyahu out of there and, his government out of the situation and not being so influential and destructive, I think is the main thing we have to do, and it's not going to be easy.
All right, I got a little bit ahead of myself there. I put up the AI article. You wanted to discuss that as well. We only have about 25, 30 minutes left. So you know what? Let me, unless you want to talk, I mean, I'll kind of leave it up to you. There's a couple ways we can go. We can talk about Tom Hartman's piece in Common Dreams about artificial intelligence, which you had recommended. We can also discuss the article on thebigpicturereport.com, your blog, Arlen's blog, the Thoughtleader's blog, and your most recent is from the New York Times, How to Defeat Trump's Paragraph. Now, I will note, I did discuss that article, the opinion piece, briefly, but your take on it is more than welcome. So where do you want to go? New York Times, Defeat Trump, or Tom Hartman, Artificial Intelligence? Your call.
First, how about something different? And that for a moment, because we talked about Trump's cabinet. They're all billionaires and they all have crazy ideas. And this is one of the craziest things I saw for a headline here. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. swims in Washington Creek that flows with sewage and bacteria. Did you hear about that?
I did read that, and I just have no comment. I mean, if this idiot wants to go swimming in raw sewage, it's not quite raw sewage, but close to that. If that's what he wants to do, who am I to say don't do it?
Point? I can't imagine what his point could be. I mean, that place has been known as, something you don't go into that water for years. And he decides, well, he can do it, and he's bringing his grandchildren in with him, his whole family. To me, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly where he was swimming. I bike by there a lot. The water smells kind of a little bit if you're too close to it. If there's a lot, I don't. I mean, but I don't know what to say to that. I mean, okay. Here's the article. I'll just, I said raw sewage. I mean, that really wasn't much of an exaggeration. Here you go. This is the New York Times. I was reading about this in the Washington Post. Swims in Washington Creek, Rock Creek. They call it Washington Creek. It's Rock Creek. That's what we call it. That flows with sewage and bacteria. I mean, what?
Yeah. I think it does show you the kind of judgment that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has. And it kind of goes along with his other conspiracy theories about, about vaccinations. And he just totally doesn't follow the current mainstream thinking when it comes to health. And I can't imagine anybody would recommend going in that particular sewage water with their family. It's nuts. And so I think Robert F. Kennedy is kind of nuts too.
Well, I don't think you're too far out on a limb with that position, Arlen. I think that's pretty much may well be common knowledge at this point.
Yeah, his family feels the same way. They're really embarrassed by him, and understandably.
But to be fair, Arlen, he talks a lot about diet, and he's right there. We do eat really unhealthy foods. I think he was a really bad pick. I talked about this on my program. I said he should not be confirmed. I think Tulsi should have been confirmed. She's not a billionaire, by the way. Neither is Hegseth, and neither is Rubio. So the foreign policy team seems like a little less billionaire-ish than some of the others. RFK Jr. really isn't a billionaire, but he's very, very rich, family money, of course. Doge, the whole deal. I think Kennedy was a terrible pick. But I get the skepticism among the American public towards experts, because experts haven't stopped their slide, haven't even fought against the slide towards impoverishment or ever greater insecurity facing the tens of millions of hundreds of millions of Americans even.
Yeah, we're in bad shape right now. There's a lot of problems, not only militarily and foreign policy wise, but economically. And that Trump's not doing the things he promised he would be able to do, like slow down inflation and get the stock market up. And he's pretty much failed on all those things. He just tries to he makes the effort, but he doesn't get the results.
All right, Arlen, I gave you a choice of stories, and you chose from column C. I said A or B, and you said C. So now I'm going to use my power as the one who controls everything, actually.
Okay.
I just want to briefly point this story out because when I show or highlight stories where I think Trump is actually doing something positive that I like, it is not to tell you that I think Trump, when I say you, I don't mean just you, or I mean the audience, it's not to say, oh, I think Trump is a good president. It's to make the point that the Democrats are so bad that when Trump does something that to me is obvious and should have been done from the beginning, but the Democrats never did it, it tells you just how bad they are too, and why we really need to go in a different direction. We need to go away from the Republican Party. And there, did you see? I didn't say the Republican Party, Arlen. I said the Republicratic Party, because I know that you and Tom don't like that.
Well, I hope you don't say things like the Democrat Party.
The Democrat or the Republican or. So here Trump is pushing, and I know he said, oh, I can wrap up that Ukraine war in 2 weeks or 2 days or whatever. And obviously that was wrong. But he hasn't given up, and I give him a lot of credit. Trump envoys Witkoff, and we know Witkoff had success leveraging the power of the White House to get Netanyahu to at least stop killing Palestinians for a month or so. Trump envoys 2 months. Trump envoys Witkoff and Kellogg to go to Turkey for Russia-Ukraine talks. I think that's very good news. It is not determinative yet. We don't even know if those talks are really going to happen yet, and for good reason. And it's not for once, and I often blame I just want to highlight this story because I think it does show something positive. And maybe you said you don't think Trump cares about human life, and maybe he doesn't, and I don't think there's a lot of evidence that he does, but he does seem to really want to stop the war between Russia and Ukraine. And even there, can't even say that's just because of his closeness to Putin, because he and Putin haven't been that close lately. But here's what it says. U.S. officials are hoping Russia will agree to a comprehensive 30-day ceasefire. And Zelensky said he will only attend if Russia's Putin is also there. So I think that is a wholly reasonable position for Zelensky to take. I think Zelensky is saying, hey, I'll go. I'll make the effort. And I'm usually critical of Zelensky, very much so. But obviously, if Putin won't go to this high-level summit, Arlen, then Russia doesn't and won't stop the war.
Well, yeah, what it all boils down to is, what does Russia really want? You may not agree with me, but I think it wants to get more territory, to push forward and destroy the Ukrainian government. And that's what he wants to do. But so if we have a peace deal, he may not be able to get that particular ending. That's just the way that particular part of the world is. It's uncertain right now because we don't know exactly what Trump is thinking or what he's going to be doing next, or who he's alive.
I think it's more Putin who's really the wild card at this point, perhaps even more so than Zelensky, because Trump has really pushed Zelensky, and it seems like Zelensky's all right, we'll work, we'll do land for peace, whatever, responding to American pressure. At this point, Putin is the wild card. I agree, but I give Trump credit for trying.
Yeah, I mean, Trump has always been pretty good with Putin, favorable toward him. But lately, we've seen that Trump is backing off a little bit from Putin and wondering just what the Russian leader is doing right now. And I think he doesn't really believe that Putin and the Russians really want peace there. So we'll see.
All right, Arlen, let's get to another one of your stories then. Since you wouldn't choose, I'm going to choose for you. And it's basically based on what I think. I'm trying to glean your preference. You did recommend this article. It's by one of your faves. I guess the pantheon for Arlen is Robert Reich and Tom Hartman. And then I don't know who's number 3.
Tom Friedman might be number 3.
Oh, well, no. Oh, right. I forgot. Yeah. And also Christoph, you're
Christoph,
right.
yeah.
Nick Christoph, I forgot. I think he's up there too. So this is Common Dreams, which I actually like. Have you written for them? I think you've had a piece or two in there. No?
No, I've followed them over the years. They've been around a long time, and it's a good group.
You had there's another one of these sort of smaller, alternative, progressive papers I think you used to write for Arlen. Maybe I'm mistaken about that. I'm not sure. So here's Hartman, rubbing his hands, or whatever the word is, wringing his hands with very legitimate concerns, I would say, about artificial intelligence. What scared you most, if I can use the term scared, or if not scared, what jumped out at you when you saw this piece by Hartman?
I think that Hartman is saying that the MAGA crowd, the Trump crowd, are going to try to use AI to further their own gains, and by influencing elections and all the things that this new technology is going to do, and they seem to be able to weaponize these kind of things, and the right wing and the Democrats really have to pay a lot of attention to what's going on with this particular with the AI and all the things surrounding it, because this kind of technology goes very fast and it's very powerful.
Well, I was taken by the first paragraph where Hartman references the new Pope, Leo the 14th. And I actually, before even reading it, but only seeing that you wanted to talk about this column, I sent back to you an article about Pope Leo, because he has indeed made AI a major issue that he will address in his papacy. So I was actually pleased. I think Hartman did a good job. I agree with this, that he referenced what Leo had to say, calling artificial intelligence one of the main threats facing humanity, saying it challenges human dignity, justice, and labor. And that's why, by the way, Leo chose the name Leo, because Pope Leo the 13th, and he says this, Leo flat out said, hey, Leo the 13th addressed the challenges of the 19th century, including the challenges facing labor from increasing concentrations of wealth and capital in the hands of industrialists. That's what Leo the 13th did. I'm Leo the 14th. I see artificial intelligence to be a very significant threat to those important people as well.
I just can't get over the fact that the Pope decided to name himself Leo, because it happens to be the name of my father.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, but my father was not the 13th. So, but so far, I mean, from what I've heard and seen, this Pope Leo the 14th seems more along the lines of Pope Francis. He seems to care about, the poor people and, working people and humanity. So we didn't get the super conservative we thought we might get. So this guy seems to be pretty liberal, and I hope that he continues to sound that way.
100%, Arlen. This is what I discussed in yesterday's program with Jack, Catholic Jack, who we bring in often to talk about issues involving Catholicism. So the Pope would be an issue of Catholicism. So you may want to check that out, folks who missed it. I thought it was a really good program. I always like having Jack on. He's very thoughtful, very thought-provoking, and an excellent writer as well. Like you, Arlen.
If you talk about Catholicism, the Supreme Court is made up of mostly Catholic men and who are very right-wing and conservative. So I hope that at least they look at what the Pope is saying and, hope it would make a difference, but I doubt that it will.
Yeah, Jack and I discussed a little bit that issue as well. And he, like you, is pessimistic about the ability of the Pope to influence the current justices. But, or for that matter, J.D. Vance, right? J.D. Vance is a Catholic as well.
Yeah, he is. And of course, J.D. Vance went and visited Pope Francis, and the resulting next day wasn't such a good thing. But
Wow, you say my NBA musing about the ping pong balls is some crazy wild-eyed conspiracy theory, and then you're coming out with the J.D. Vance and the
I'm
Pope
just joking,
thing.
of course. Yeah, I'm not blaming J.D.
I don't
Vance.
think anyone, to be fair to J.D. Vance, I don't think anyone's saying that, I mean, except trying to be funny, that he had anything to do with the Pope's it wasn't like an untimely demise. He had been sick for a long time. He had pneumonia, and that is how he died. So
yeah, he was 88 years old, and then
it was natural causes.
Pope Leo, I think, is relatively young in comparison. I think he's 69 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So
so was Francis, right? When he first took office, Francis became Pope about 11 years ago. So he was a little older. He was in his late 70s. This Pope, you think he's not even 70 yet? That is young for a Pope.
Yeah, I think it is pretty young for a Pope. So he may be open to new ideas. At least I hope so.
Are you excited about an American Pope, Arlen?
No, I'm not. I don't care about that. I mean, he did spend most of his growing up years, I think, in Peru. So
I don't know if he grew up there, but he was. That's where his what do you call it? The parish. His parish was in Peru, but maybe he was there at other times. I think his brother lives in Miami. I thought that's where he grew up, but I could be wrong.
Okay, well.
So there you can see it. Leo says advancement of AI played a factor in his papal name, and the threats that AI pose he views as somewhat, and I think correctly so, right, that these are in some ways comparable to what Labor faced 130.
It says a lot about Pope Leo, too, that he's aware of what's going on in the world. He's aware of these, important issues, the technology and all that. And that's, he follows what's going on and seems to have, some clear ideas about how he could, help. So anyway, he just seems like a better choice than I would have hoped for.
One more general question, and then I'll let you go. Then we'll talk about AI, because we don't have that much time. But I asked Jack this question, and then he threw it back at me, so I'll ask it to you. Do you think that let's even use the word progressive, because he is somewhat of a progressive populist on the issues. I don't know how liberal he might be. Does that would he have influence over non-Catholics, not just Catholics, but could we see that his opinions as we see them in the media could actually sway non-Catholics around the world?
Well, he probably doesn't have that much influence. He's just, he's a smart guy. But, I have to laugh when I see these newspaper headlines like Pope says we should stop all wars. Of course, they all say that. So I don't expect any, great, powerful thoughts from this Pope that'll make a difference. Although if he gets into the AI situation, that would be a good thing, I think.
Well, he doesn't have an army, right? So he can't force people to do what he wants them to do the way, presidents, prime ministers, dictators can do.
Yeah,
so I think he has to.
Power, his influence is limited, but it seems to be more positive than. That I hope for. So I'm feeling good about him anyway.
All right. Hartman raising the alarm of more fascism from AI, that AI is being used as a tool of strongmen, of dictators, of incipient dictators of the right wing around the world. And he describes the generation of millions of personalized political messages in seconds, each calibrated to manipulate a voter's specific fears or bias. Very scary. I believe this, by the way. I'm not saying he's wrong or that he's making it up or he's being an alarmist. That all is plausible to me, Arlen. But I wish he had given at least one or two examples. It would have been a lot. I'm sure there are some out there. What are some of these examples of targeted messages? Or
just the fact that a lot of it is robocalling. It's not real people, and it's just plain wrong. And not accurate, and so it gives the opposition a way of getting to people without, in not a real way. It's an artificial way that makes it very easy to do. And we just don't know what to believe anymore. At least this country, I think, for the most part, doesn't know what to believe. They're uncertain about what they hear. They're uncertain about which conspiracy theories are true. We live in an artificial world, and there's not. I think the next election is going to be a difficult one.
Well, don't you think, though, that what you're describing has already been something we've been seeing for quite some time, even well before AI, that, the media would lie to us. They wouldn't tell us what was really happening. There's even a song, I think, by Gil Scott-Heron. What is it? The revolution will not be televised. So, I mean, this is, I think it's gotten worse in a lot of ways, but I'm not, I don't know that AI is to blame. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's just one part of the whole, technology offensive that gets information to people that is not necessarily true, and and so people aren't sure just what they should believe, and I think unfortunately that's just going to get worse as time goes on. I mean, you're going to have AI situations where you're going to have a picture of somebody doing something horrible when that person didn't really do it, and that's become easy to do now. So there's a lot of problems.
Well, yeah, I mean, the great example of that is what got me suspended from YouTube for a week, or whatever the term they use, where I played a clip that apparently was J.D. Vance, but it really wasn't. And I fell for it, as did many others, and that was clearly AI generated. So we are seeing it, although that was apparently, at least it seems like it, pro-democratic AI, but who knows?
How are you supposed to know? I mean, it's really unfair, but you have to.
Well,
check
I should have, because if I just Googled it, I would have figured it out, and I just my spidey sense was not tingling, and I didn't figure it out. So I'm paying the price. I paid the price. Arlen, one thing I really give, and I'm, your heroes aren't mine. I'm not a big fan of Hartman. I'm not a big fan of Reich. I'm not a big fan of any of them, Christoph or whoever. But I give Hartman credit for this too. He does not just describe a bad situation, which I think he describes pretty accurately. This is a real concern. He gives examples of what he says we must do. But my problem is, well, first of all, do you agree with what he proposes as solutions?
Well, I got to ask you one question, though, Hal. If you don't like, the people that I like, who are people who are influential for you?
Say it again. Who do I like? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
I do like pretty much Brianna Joy Gray. There aren't a lot of people who write. There's a guy, I think he's dead now, I really liked, who wrote for Black Agenda Report, Glenn Ford, but I haven't seen his work in quite a while. I believe he died. And there's also a writer who I don't know if she's maybe a special contributor named Margaret Kimberly, who I think writes for them also for Black Agenda Report. I like Margaret Kimberly a lot. But I generally, people who are distributed throughout media, I have problems with, because the reason that they're distributed is because they're presenting a message that is congenial to the billionaire class, or they wouldn't get the distribution.
Well, I don't know that Tom Hartman is that way. So,
well, here's my argument for why he is. Because he tells you to vote for Democrats.
Well, I don't know if that's his major thrust, but, again, you have this political system that we have where what choices do we have? It's Republican or Democrat, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
He has some influence. He has a big audience. He's on radio or TV or video, whatever, every day, pretty much. He could start talking to his audience about joining together to build an alternative to the Republican Party. He could do that.
Yeah, I know that's important to you, and rightfully so, because we do need an alternative to Democrats and Republicans. We need some independent parties, independent people out there, and we're not totally on board for just Republicans or Democrats. So we should have that, Hal. What you're desiring is what we should have.
Well, I think he would be he's obviously much better placed to do that than I am, to promote it, and that's what I do. So I would hope he would as well. But there's a lot of, you get perks by supporting Democrats. You get people like Robert Reich come on your program. You get other Congress members come on your program, and you get good distribution, which you wouldn't necessarily get if you took the very hardline anti-two-party stances that I and some others take. Although there are some hosts like Jimmy Dore who have big audiences. But Jimmy has really, I stopped subscribing to him. I know you don't like him at all. And I have real problems with him. He questions the science behind the climate cataclysm. We know human activity is destroying our planet. He questions that. I don't know how you could question it. He has some other views I really don't agree with. He's been good on peace and war issues, but on other issues, he's really crypto. I believe he's a crypto kook. So yeah, I have real problems with. But taking those kind of positions also helps build an audience, because there's an overlap between very skeptical anti-government, anti-two-party types and crypto and climate change deniers.
Yeah.
And also he's anti-vax, which is a big issue for me too.
Yeah, I don't see much that you're saying that makes me very sympathetic with him.
Well, he's been incredibly valuable in pointing out the corruption in the Democratic Party and trying to hold Democratic leaders accountable.
Well, that's not that hard to do. I mean, both parties have a lot of ways that they've made money and.
But I agree with you. It's not hard to point out the flaws in the Democratic Party. But the people that you cited as some of that you really, and that I put them, I wasn't unfair to you, because you have said you admire Reich, you admire Christoph, you admire Hartman, and they all will pay lip service to criticism of Democrats, but ultimately they always come back to ask you to vote for Democrats.
Well, again, that's about the only choice we have for the most part. They know if they get into, Joel Stein or whatever, they're not going to get any influence. They're not going to get anywhere. So, it should be easier, but it isn't.
All right, Arlen, it is after 3. I didn't get through the whole AI, but unfortunately, maybe we can continue it next week. I agree with Hartman's solution, especially we need some kind of, public spaces for media, really. Like you have the Old Town Public Square, the Commons. He likes that term, the Boston Common. We need something like that where anyone can go and present their views.
And maybe some rules and some laws that pertain to AI. They need to be some kind of control over, how awful it can be, from what I've heard. So, I hope there's some kind of regulation of it, but who's going to do the regulating? I don't know.
All right, Arlen, before we end the program, my final question, anything else? Anything you want to touch on before we say adieu until next week?
I think there's just a lot going on, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about next week, and nothing else at the moment comes to me, but, I'll look forward to talking with you again next Tuesday.
I was going to ask you, Arlen, I'm actually going to mute Arlen now so he can't even respond, but I was going to ask him, but now I'm not going to ask him if he wanted to answer the question that I put in the thumbnail, which is a breakup between Bibi and Trump too much to hope for? But we already discussed it, and Arlen did answer it, which, I think correctly so, which is basically, it's way too early to tell. We just don't know. There appear to be some differences between the two, but we don't have nearly sufficient information to make a decision with respect to the future of these two extremely powerful and destructive individuals. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be talking Greens with Green Andy Ellis, gubernatorial candidate here in Maryland next year.